Hi.
So,
It's great to finally meet you.
yes, you too. So, you told me that this is a view from your dock in
Yes,
Kenova, is it?
Kenora. It's Ontario, Canada.
Kenora. Okay.
It's Kenora, and it's on Lake of the Woods. And Lake of the Woods is a very large body of water which goes through Canada and the U.S., goes into Minnesota, and it is a large. Yeah, there's like I think almost 15,000 islands, so it's very
Mhm.
big. And you're by a lake too, which is great. So this is uh, probably a scene you've seen too.
Nice. Yeah. How often do you get these kind of sunsets down at your dock? Is this like
Every every
a
day. It's
nightly
called
thing?
Sunset Country.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, ha- have you always been in Canada? Have you ever lived down here in the States or lived elsewhere in the world?
I've traveled a lot in the States.
Hmm.
Well, when I was a kid, we used to have a caravan that we would take around. Um, but I've traveled in the States a lot, but no, I've always lived in Canada, central Canada.
Great. Yes, I have only been to Montreal and Quebec a few times when my wife and I first moved to Vermont. And holy
Oh,
crap,
yeah.
when was that? That was like 2002.
Oh, yeah. Long time ago. Um,
Yeah,
Probably pretty much the same.
yeah.
A lot of empty places in Canada still, and yeah, it's a great
Hmm.
inspiration for a landscape painter for sure.
Oh, cool. So, um, how long have you been at this? This whole painting racket.
Professionally, like yeah, selling artwork as my job, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, about 13 to 15 years.
Okay.
Um, how about you? Have you always
Uh,
done this? I'm
no.
self-taught. Are you self-taught as well? Go to school.
Yes, I used to be a sculptor and mold maker for years, and I've been painting
Oh, cool.
for about 9 years now. And I taught myself how when I was in New Orleans, and I started off with little still life paintings of beer bottles and oysters, and then I started to move on to portraits of famous people and some local landmarks, and I kind of got into the landscape painting aspect of it. And my grandfather had been a landscape painter for almost 50 years in Connecticut, and I never kind
Oh, wow.
of really thought about it. And then I went back and I saw what he had been working on. This is when he was in his early 90s still. He's in his late 90s. I think he's 98 or something now. And he doesn't really paint too much anymore. But he was still going up until a few years ago. And I saw the breadth of his work and how many pieces he was working on all at the same time. And
Mhm.
it just kind of seemed like it could be fun while I'm traveling to just do landscapes. And so when my business ended, like when I moved out of New Orleans in 2017, I'd been doing markets there since 2011. I just decided that I was going to travel and paint wherever we went. And yeah, it's worked out.
Yeah, it's great that you've been able to do that. I mean, you see so many different landscapes. I love how your work, you can see so many different areas, but there's a lot of similarities as well. And like, I don't know, I enjoy seeing how similar places are as well. There's a lot of similarity between Canada and the U.S. in terms of geography.
Yeah. What I've noticed about Canada is there's a little less trash, and other than that, like I actually have to see the road signs or hear the people in like Montreal or what is it, Trois Rivières. I don't speak French, obviously. I need to hear them speak in order for me to really realize.
That was good for my ears. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's fun. Now, I see on my screen here that you've sort of zoomed in on the reference image a little bit, and it looks like you're blocking in your blue.
I'm all over the place, but I go just back and forth. So generally I'll block in this basic shape. So this is a known place. So I'm trying to get the tree line here, but other than that, it's going to be very interpretive. Just kind of, I decide what colors I mainly want to use that day, and then I go from there. You have a very great color sense. Do you generally choose your colors, or how do you start your process?
That's very kind of you. I don't feel I have a good color sense because I am a little bit color deficient. So what I've done is I've learned to use color combinations, and so I don't really deviate from certain pigments too much. I kind of have a color world that works for me, and it's essentially just a modified CMYK scale, and I tend to paint on either very, very bright orange or pink grounds that I put on top of my gessoed boards, and I'd like to say that I try to be careful about my colors, but I'd be kind of full of shit. I mean, I wing so much of it just because I'm not sure if I'm really seeing what I think I'm seeing. And that's why lately I've just really been trying to focus on some of the topographical aspects. Really getting some of the direction of paint and thickness of paint going.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I could kind of just try new things, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel like an old man.
Yes, I feel old as well a lot of the time, but as I am, as my children would say. But I feel like you do try new things all the time. I feel like you have new things come out. I don't know. That's my perception of what you're doing anyway.
Once again, Holly, that's very kind of you. Every time I see some of your large when I see some of your large tree pieces, they're very intriguing because of your emphasis on the negative space in your work, and then
Those,
you really kind of
yeah.
push that complementary color thing.
Those are my favorite paintings to do. I like pushing the color limits and abstract. I get to abstract things a little bit more. I think it's, for me personally, and that's one of the reasons I like yours. You're impressionistic, or whatever you want to call your style. I don't know. Names are just names, but I love seeing something beyond what I'm looking at in my reference photo. I mean, I can just look at my reference photo if I want to see that, or I can look out my door, but it's exciting to me to create something different on a canvas.
Yeah. I had a conversation with another painter and a sculptor a few years back, and we came to the kind of nonsensical conclusion that I just had to make up just to tell people what my style was when they ask. I don't really feel as though I necessarily have one, and if I did have one, I'd feel weird telling people about it. So
Yeah.
I just settled on the notion that I'm a distillationist.
Okay, interesting.
So essentially, I'm just kind
what's
of,
behind that classification?
well, I believe the night that we had that conversation, it was mostly laughing, and I think the other two guys were mostly in the bag at that point. So it was the notion that they thought that I took very complicated images and then sort of boiled them down to their essential elements and then reintroduced other things into it to give interest and emphasis. And so, yeah, I just sort of, and so I just sort of went with it and kept it, and really, really never thought about it since. It's one of those things that people who are trying to be nice and interested will ask you about,
Yeah.
what do you call this style? What do you call that style, Holly,
I
of
get that
painting
a
things
lot.
so that they
That
look like
question, yeah.
things?
And I kind of come up with a different answer almost every time because I don't know. It depends on how I'm feeling and what I define myself as. I don't know. It's just hard to define yourself. The other question I get a lot is how long does a painting take, right? I'm sure you get that a lot too.
And I'm tired of doing that thing where I say, it's taken 9 years because that's how long it's taken for me to learn my craft, and that whole thing. I think I tried that once out at a show or something, and then I just felt kind of gross doing it. So I never really did it after that.
I mean, people are just curious. There's nothing. I don't usually think there's any malintention behind it. It's just people are curious, and they like defining things.
Yes, they do. And in our culture now, there's not a lot of emphasis on sort of some of the older modalities of art and learning art history, or sort of being concerned with where you lie in that tradition. So I don't think that people really have the vocabulary the layperson who is interested doesn't really know how to tell you that they're interested besides just coming out and saying, hey, I really like
true.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's some of my best conversations with like buyers and people who were just kind of interested in what I was doing was when I acknowledged that, and then I said that it's okay for you to ask whatever question, however you'd like to ask it. And then um, when they knew that I was open, and then I kind of acknowledged that it's hard to speak to artists about their work, then that's when they really got a little bit more engaged in the conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and now I'm trying to do some palette knife stuff, and I think I'm going way too thick all of a sudden. But I'm going to try to bring it back. It's so
I
tempting
always
because
think I should try the palette knife, and I just never do. I don't know. Have you always used a palette knife?
no, I used to use a palette knife pretty much only to scrape my paint and transfer it from brush to brush because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like the fact that they were always breaking. And then I got a hold of these specialized ones that are made in Vancouver by a guy who I interviewed for a podcast early on, Ray Hyder, and he makes these things called oak blades, and they're solid pieces of either titanium or stainless steel, and they work great. So that's kind of changed the way that I apply paint, actually. Yeah, there's so much to this image right now, and just to let you know, what I normally do is I flash the reference photo in the beginning of the video,
Okay.
and so then people can
So
see,
people will see what we're doing.
yeah, the interpretation of it, and it's a really dynamic skyscape that you captured.
It's too much. I feel like it's making me paint too much right now. I usually go too far, and then I have to take it back to simplify it a bit.
Okay, so do you block in all of your colors right off the bat? Do you have the impulse to sort of cover your entire picture plane with paint?
I usually block in things, so I've been getting away from it a little bit lately and trying to be more intuitive, but usually what I will do is sketch out my shapes. I don't usually do an underpainting. I did it today just to give me a frame of reference of where to start. But usually I sketch everything out, the big blocks of colors that I want to use, and then I go from there. And I work around the colors. So, for example, here I started with this blue, and I'm just kind of working around it and trying to make it lighter or darker, whatever color I want. I don't even know if that answers your question. Yeah, that's how I usually start.
Okay.
I try to leave as much of the background as possible, and I can tell I've overworked this area here, but it's hard to see with my glare of my, I'll maybe pull my light a little bit, but it's overworked a bit, but I'll let it dry. The beauty of acrylics is I can let it dry and rework it. And the beauty of oils is you can just wipe it off too. I don't like to be too fragile with stuff.
Me neither. I think that's great that you said that. I'm a big advocate for taking control of your materials and your piece, and not letting it sort of dictate the rest of your day if it doesn't work out, you know?
Exactly. I know some people like to destroy their work that they don't like, and I don't know, I'm frugal. I'd rather just recover what I can, and if it needs to be completely painted over, I can do that. It's not a big deal. But usually you can fix something.
Yeah. I have no patience to go back into things, so I often repaint things almost immediately.
Yeah.
And
Because why sit and look, right?
Yeah, I really enjoy the fact that many of my pieces have 2 or 3 other pieces underneath them,
Yeah.
and I think it's sort of like a past life of a painting
Yeah.
where it had these other incarnations. But when people um, are interested in that one specifically, you know, then they know that there's something else underneath there.
Yeah. And it's all work to get you where you need to get on that.
Yeah. Yes.
I've got to stop looking at yours. I'm just going to use your painting as my frame of reference. No, I'm going to look at my picture instead.
I change so often throughout a piece. That's been some of the feedback that I've been most interested in reading, is that other people who are either painting enthusiasts or they're painters or they just started, they'll say how schizophrenic I am and how there's no rhyme or reason to where I go or what I'm doing. And they're sort of frustrated that in the end, it turns out to be an image, but there's like I don't go from A to B to C to D. I kind of jump around and I start. Sometimes I even start in the middle, which is very frustrating. I know because some people who I have taken on as students to some degree over the years have also given me that feedback.
They want steps, right?
Yes, they want steps. The funny part was I couldn't stand reading about other people's steps when I first started, and I was kind of hitting all the magazines at the local bookstore, like the periodicals about painting and about fine art. I did not want to read anyone's steps. I wanted to see maybe 1 or 2 progress photos, and I just wanted to constantly be looking at new things, seeing what they were looking at, how they interpreted it.
Yeah.
And I almost felt like it was a little bit of a slowing if I did it step by step. So I don't think I ever did. I'm trying to remember any time I've ever actually done another painter's step-by-step process. I don't think I did. And I also had that bad habit when I was a sculptor as well. I did not listen to the steps. Just got way too impatient.
I think it's useful to have to know what the rules are or steps are, but to know that you don't have to follow them. Totally. I think they're guidelines.
So, what were you up to before you began painting?
Well, that's a long story.
We have a little bit of time. We're about 24 minutes in.
I started off, I just knew I didn't want to work in an office. So I started off, and I love learning new things. Started off in agriculture. I'm from a farm. I grew up on a farm. Started off in agriculture and then fell in love with genetics and worked in genetics and plant breeding for a little while. I have a master's in genetics.
Oh, cool.
Then I loved the research aspect because I like figuring things out and problem solving. So I worked in market research for a while. And then when my husband finished school, I decided to play with my creative side a bit more and paint. And I've dabbled in other things, but paint is the thing that really stuck with me. So I just like figuring things out. And I think paint is another way. Painting is always figuring out the chemistry of the colors or how things work together and how different paints work. I just love how many facets there are to learn. And you're always learning, I think. So, yeah.
Yes, I think it's always a kind of a weird it's an attempt to create a harmony that was not already present. So
yeah,
I don't know about you, but I kind of think that in order to achieve that harmony, you sort of need a few different kind of cardinal aspects, or at least to be aware of them. So I kind of like to think of them as elements, but not your periodic table of elements. More like, you know, the cardinal elements. So there's like cohesion of a piece, which I kind of see as being in like an earth-like property, and then there is the movement, which is water, and then for me there always has to be heat in a painting, some point where it looks like things are heating up or there's some kind of reaction happening, and that's the fire. And then, it always helps if your paintings breathe, and that's the air.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I have a lot of those. I guess it's because I spend a lot of time pontificating while I work.
Well, it's a very meditative field. I feel like
Indeed.
You go into this meditation when you're painting.
Yes, I've described it like that many times, that I see it as a definite meditative practice. Do you do actual meditation as well?
I don't. I'm like the least patient person. So for me to turn my mind off is very challenging. I know I probably should, but do you do it?
Oh, I've tried. I used to be a member of the National Society of Dowsers, and I went to all sorts of conventions where they had people speaking about states of mind and how to meditate yourself here or there. I've done some kind of spiritual journey class things, and I just kind of end up getting tired most of the time. And I really can't shut my mind off like you're supposed to be able to. And I find that I need to physically move my hands in order to stop my mind sometimes.
That's how I feel too. I also love to exercise, and I feel like I get more of main benefits from moving. I can tell when I need to paint, and I can tell when I need to exercise.
That's good to be able to know that. I just sort of tell myself I have to move.
Well, traveling is a bit of moving too, right? If you're moving around all the time, that's a lot of work.
It's not. It's not. I wouldn't call it exercise by any means, because it's not focused enough and it doesn't get your heart rate up in the right way. It's more like doing some hunter-gatherer stuff, because
Yeah.
when you're moving, a lot of people don't realize this, but um, it's super expensive to live full year round in parks. So
Yeah.
where they have all of your hookups available, and so you can plug in your electricity, and you can get your sewer and your water and everything else. And for a family of 4, when we travel, um, I had a whole solar system put in. So, you know, we would be able to do something called boondocking, which is just kind of stay out and you kind of roll in with your water, and you have empty tanks, and you have a solar system that you can charge things off of. You know, we use propane as well. And that only works for so many days, though. And then there's this hunt, because you have to go and you have to find water again to put into your tank. And then you have to find places to throw your garbage away. So, I mean, I'm constantly moving. I'm just like not jogging or anything.
No, you're constantly problem solving.
Yes. So I think that's good for my daughters to see as well. Because we've had a lot of issues arise just kind of traveling for all these years. And yeah, we always kind of figure out how to get through it. And it's never just sort of stopped us before. And that's one of the fears that I think a lot of people have before they get on the road, is that circumstances are just going to shut them down completely. Have you ever done the RV thing or like a van camping thing before?
Yeah, we've done it
Yeah.
in the States, the Black Hills area.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's beautiful there. So unique too. Similar to here, but very different at the same time. And when I was younger, we went all through the States, to Florida one year, and then to California along the coast another. We've also done it in Australia.
Wow.
And yeah, we like moving around. I absolutely love traveling. It was an amazing camper culture. I really loved camping there. If you ever get the chance, it's a long way away.
Indeed. Yeah, we've thought about what we could do in Europe, possibly. And, you know, with everything that's happening now, I think we're just lucky to be able to move. And
Yeah, definitely.
any plans that we've had are sort of put on hold indefinitely. And yeah, I always thought that it would be interesting to go around Europe in an RV. I mean, it's not like we can take our.
I've thought about that too.
Yeah, the one that we travel in now is way too big to actually send over.
No, but I mean, they would have them available, and it would be just really interesting to see where you would end up finding places to camp. You know, I think you'd see Europe in a completely different way than the traditional sense. So I think it'd be very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I have things sort of organized. I don't really have any of the thickness of paint or the direction that I want now. And your video it's a little hard to see because you have a little bit of a cut signal. So I see most of your piece, but it's a little fuzzy. So I see where you're going with
Good. Just the way I like it. A little fuzzy.
it. Wow.
I'm just not sure if I want to put the pink in from the reference photo.
Hmm.
Not much of a pink person. I play around with it every once in a while, but it scares me a bit.
Yeah, it really concerns me because I'm I'm a little off when it comes to reds and pink and violet. So that's why I just sort of stick to magenta normally, and if I have to, I'll put some cad red,
Yeah.
usually like a cad red deep, so I can really tell the difference. Um, but I'm usually nervous about actually applying red or pink, so that's what, or sometimes even like really intense orange. So that's why I put it down to begin with. And I feel as though just
You can
allowing,
slowly hide it. Yeah.
yes, that allowing it to come through is a little bit easier.
And I had initially started with a red background with this painting in mind, but I know today I just wasn't feeling the red, so
Yeah.
I might have shot myself in the foot a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting for me to see you go from what you had for your underpainting and see how you arrange your shapes. That's probably the one thing I'm most interested in, specifically looking at your work, is the order of which you arrange your shapes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also interested and not sure how I go about doing it. Uh, sometimes sometimes lately I've been trying to kind of exercise my brain and do it the opposite of the way I would normally do it, just to see
Okay.
how I can make it a piece more interesting. So I've been like, when I do skies, let's say I will just paint the clouds first and then work everything else out, because I just want to start with the focal point and make sure that is the central focal point, or
Hmm.
central point of interest, I guess. But I don't really have a rule about how I do the shapes anymore. I'm trying to become a little bit looser, but I think
Okay.
that it's important for me to still have a lot of structure. It's just the way my brain works. I like to still make sure I have lines, like clean lines, and but I do like practicing around that, trying to loosen up a bit.
I found for me that if I start to have too many clean lines, I completely change the way I start to apply paint.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes from being looser with a lot of different direction and weight to some of the marks to being super uniform. And I don't know why that happens, but I end up spending a lot longer um, finishing or bringing a piece to a satisfactory conclusion when I start with lines and I reinforce those lines. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes I feel as though not having much of an underpainting or not really planning out too far ahead allows me to have the sort of happy accidents I need.
Those are what make it, right? I think.
Yes.
I think those are what make it exciting.
I kind of like when I see some pieces of paint or passages in a piece or whole areas of a painting that are kind of cavalier and they depart from some of the rest of the planning or structure. And I like when other people do that, so I try to have some of that myself.
I'll often just look at it and see where can I go, where can I veer pretty far and make a statement without it being too dramatic and take away from anything.
Yes.
And that's what makes it fit to me.
I'd say most of my work that I don't post, that never kind of sees the light of day, or that if it is in a post is sort of noted as a piece of shit, is when I think I've gotten a little dramatic, and it just feels like I've carried away. I've gotten a little carried away.
Yeah.
And I hear people from my family when I was a kid, oh, Christopher, you got carried away with that, didn't you? Like,
You went too far.
Yeah, you just went too far. And that's just my generic parent-grandparent voice. Oh, I like the variation of clouds in the reference image that you provided as well. I don't think that I did enough planning to actually get them in, though.
I know, I'm not sure if I'm going to add them or not.
That's another thing I like, though, about pretty much just having an hour to sit and paint and talk, is that you see also some of the you see the things that you do subconsciously without even thinking. Yeah, oh, I really mucked that up. What the hell?
I know, I feel like I'm mucking stuff up too, but anyway, keep going.
Yeah, and this is when I'm going to take my palette knife.
Do you always work in oils, or do you mix it up?
I'm sorry?
Do you always work in oils, or do you mix it up?
Oh, well, I started working in gouache, and then I moved to acrylic, and then I moved to oil, and then I moved back to acrylic, and now I'm working with water-soluble oil, which I really like, and I don't actually mix the water in with the water-soluble oil paint. I just use it to clean my brushes, and I don't really use much of a medium now. I just use straight paint. Like, there's no filler or anything. It comes out of the tube, gets mixed, gets put on the surface. And before, I did a lot of experimenting with all sorts of different mediums for different effects. And it just it took up a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And I had all these like varying dry times. And then subsequently, when I varnished some of the pieces, I found out later that if there was pressure, even though they were really, really dry, if there was any kind of pressure on the surface when I shipped them, some of the marks from the packaging were transferred onto the surface. And I was a little shocked at that. And so
Yeah.
I was able to still use those mediums and figure out how to avoid that from happening. But one day, I just didn't have any more medium, and I just thought, I'm just going to do a painting with straight paint and see how that works. And if I need to go thin with it, I'm not going to water it down. What I'm going to do is just scrape it or use very little paint on the brush, and I'm going to see if that works. And it worked, and I was very pleased with the results from that. So, I still do some underpaintings for large pieces in acrylic, and sometimes I have inklings to do some pieces in acrylic just because they would go a lot faster. Like I'd be able to finish them in about half the time. But I'm kind of attached.
You're moving around a lot. Do you feel like you have to be a bit fragile with moving around, or do you have a good storage system in place?
I have a good storage system, and it's mostly now an issue of getting paint, because I don't want to travel with a ton of paint. And then sometimes when we travel to different areas, the nearest place where you can get paint is like an hour and a half away. And I just always like to have it on hand. I don't want to do too much thinking before I try to not think.
Yeah. Where I live, everything is 2.5. The closest city is 2.5 hours away.
Okay.
So that's my closest center where I can pick stuff up. So I've relied heavily on the mail service here in Canada.
Yeah.
Which has been great, but when COVID happened, boy, I just scrambled to get stuff for the longest time. You realized how here our supply chain is pretty slow. So I started using different colors a little bit, which is kind of interesting because I have a pretty set palette. But I was able to source some stuff in Canada, which is nice. I kind of discovered some new brands, and which I really enjoy. And they're always a little bit different in colors, and I don't know. It's kind of been a happy accident to be able to use different stuff.
Wow, 2.5 hours. But you have like a close grocery store, right?
Yeah. But,
okay.
I mean, we don't have an art supply.
Gotcha.
So we stores and
something just happened that kind of ruined some of the parts that I was just working on. I'm trying to figure out what it was. And it looks like you have really departed from. No, that you've really departed from the orange and the violet that's in the reference photo, and that you've taken it sort of like a green, yellow. Are you using Payne's Gray at all?
Yeah, I use Payne's Gray, and I have 2 brands of Payne's Gray that I like, and I used to always use Prussian Blue, and I am working with a little bit of it today, but I like cerulean blue now.
Oh, okay.
It's just a little too dark.
Yeah. I am not a fan of the cerulean.
I never used it until this year.
Yeah.
And now I love it. I like it because the one that I get has a little bit of green in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I'm in love with it. What don't you like about it?
It has too much green in it.
Yeah, I like the green.
I'm not a fan of green. I'm okay with things being green, like in nature. Don't get me wrong. I'm not walking outside in the morning and making a face and saying, "What the fuck is this?" It's that when I see green used in still objects like colors for cars or T-shirts, like clothing, or in paintings, it's very off-putting to me. It's
Interesting. You've
yeah.
seen my work before, right?
Oh yes.
I always think I have a lot of greens, but I probably have more blues, which doesn't really mean anything because everything has all the colors mixed together. But yeah, I love green.
Yes. And if you go back and look at my paintings, you'll notice if you look, and if you're specifically looking for green, a marked lack of green paintings.
Yeah.
And it's not because I don't.
If I think about.
Yeah, it's because I straight up. Yeah. It just it's very difficult for me to make work. So when I do have something that I really want to paint that has green in it, I will not use a green pigment. I will use a yellow and a black or a yellow and a blue, and I'll mix a either very, very brownish green or a very kind of dark green, or I'll just surround a gray with enough red that it becomes green visually.
Yeah.
You know, to be tricky.
Tricky, yeah. Do you use paintspray?
Yes, it is a favorite color of mine. At first, I read that people never want to use um, a black or anything like a black in their palette. And I don't remember who said it or in what art magazine. And I had heard it when I went to art school as well. I never did any painting really. I just stuck to drawing and sculpture. But I heard other painter friends talk about the color black. And back in the 90s, apparently, it was a no-go. And I have since really embraced using lamp black and Payne's gray. And yeah, I mean, if you put too much of it, or if you are not really being too cognizant about what the intensity or you know, the colors that you're putting around it, if they're just kind of willy-nilly, then yeah, it's going to look like a hole in your piece. I just don't think that happens as often as the naysayers of Black and Payne's Gray claim. Okay.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Now, how close are you from being able to call this piece kind of a completed idea or statement?
Well, normally I would leave it now for a couple hours and go back to it.
Okay.
So
Because
do you
I'm
finish in
about
one
ready
sitting?
to sign
I
mine.
don't usually. Oh, really? I haven't looked
Oh,
for
yeah.
a while. Oh, yeah, I could see that.
Because I'm getting to the point now
I-
where. Oh, I'm sorry.
You're gonna
Go ahead.
mess it up? You're gonna go too far?
Yes. I can tell when I'm about to go too far and when my marks are still interesting to me. And then I can see myself jamming it with stuff that shouldn't be there. So I'm just about at that point. So I'm going to.
I think I already passed that point. I jammed it with too much.
Oh, really?
But yeah, I think so. But that's okay.
It looks like you use a pretty big brush as well.
I went too small. I go back. I went too small, and so I'm trying to bring just broader strokes back. I think it's
Gotcha.
too busy.
Yeah, so I'm just going to put.
I always opt for a bigger brush rather than a smaller brush. I think that gets stressed. Do you use a small brush?
Hello?
Hi. Do you lose me?
Yes, just for a second.
Okay.
I believe what you were asking was about big brushes or small brushes.
Yeah.
I tend to just sort of grab whatever I feel is most useful at the moment. And I tend to use larger brushes at the beginning. And then at the very end, actually, too. Because sometimes I'm looking to drag a piece of paint across.
Yes, especially if you're using oils, right?
Yeah. And I think I might do that right now. I think I'm going to add one big piece of paint before I sign it. And okay, so I'm going to take a slightly larger brush here. And then I think I want to come this way. And then I'll put a larger block here. Okay. Yeah. I think that's about it, Holly.
You're done?
I think that's all I really have to say here. Oh my gosh. So
And I'll just call it for now. I can't sign
all right.
it yet, though. Do you want me to sign it?
No.
I guess.
I'm not gonna.
It's a story
I'm not gonna
of this
force you to do
time.
anything.
It can be a story of this time.
Okay. Well,
I don't want to make you keep going. So you got stuff to do.
I am going to sign the piece. Okay. And
I love your
where am I going to
signature,
sign
by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Exactly. That's what I love about it. You just do what that's very.
So I'm going to try to make it small. Yeah, I threw it in at the very top. It looks okay. I don't know. I may change it. And just a little bit more here. I think that's it for me. You know what? I think we did a fantastic job, Holly. It was so nice meeting you and speaking with you. So I'm going to include your info in the description of the video, but do you want to tell people the best way to contact you or to see your work?
Sure. On my website, it's hollyannskeaton.com. The best way to see what I'm up to. I post pretty quickly and regularly on there. So, and on Instagram, I post everything first on Instagram. I love Instagram, especially where I live. It's nice. Keeps the world small.
Nice. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your summer in Kenora. Did I get it right?
Thank you. You got it right. That's awesome.
Okay.
Enjoy your travels. It was great to meet you, Chris.